Human nature. Why every man's destiny is to become a Buddha. Every person's capacity is to awaken. So whether it happens today or tomorrow or the day after tomorrow does not matter if the causes are developed. There are only 7 days in the week. It may happen Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, maybe Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. On some day, it can happen. I am certain of this in principle because I understand human nature. It cannot be satisfied with this miserable world. It cannot be satisfied with this ugly and violent world. It can only be satisfied when it finds its ultimate freedom from suffering, dukkha, the deathless, the unconditioned peace. And that is what meditation is, a systematic methodology for training the mind, together with virtue and discernment. The truth is, the whole controversy is absolutely wrong. It is based on prejudices, not on an experience of human nature. I speak from the experience of my own humanity, that the deeper you go, the more cultured you are. The deeper you go, the more graceful you are. The deeper you reach, the more human you become. So I can say with certainty that a person is not by nature ugly. A person by nature is born not fixed as ugly or cultured, not doomed. So, whatever you want to write on him, he will tend to become. If you are alert and aware, you will not write anything unskillful. You will leave the child alone. You will help him to be stronger. You will help him to be well nourished. You will help him to be more healthy. You will take every care in the way a gardener takes care of a rose bush. You will not force anything on the rose bush. Roses will come in their own time. They are hidden. You have just to take care. Every child has roses, lotuses, the possibility of awakening hidden in him, in his innocence. Help him to remain innocent. Don't force so-called culture, society, in the fear that if we don't force, he will become a barbarian. Without any experimentation, this controversy has been going on for centuries. I know. I have been fighting in my university with my professors because the same thing comes up again and again in every psychological and social effort to understand what to do with the child. And my standpoint from the very beginning has been not to do anything with the child. You simply protect. Your function is to nourish the child, to make him healthy, to keep him intelligent. Let him be himself, his innocence intact. He will find meditativeness very easy. If you want, if your temptation to teach is too much, teach meditation. That will make him more innocent, more harmless. Don't teach mere knowledge, culture, civilization. That becomes the burden. That becomes the false personality. That becomes the hypocrisy. The Buddha never placed unconditional demands on anyone's faith. For people from a culture where the dominant religions do make such demands, this is one of Buddhism's most attractive features. It's especially appealing to those who, in reaction to the demands of organized religion, embrace the view of scientific empiricism that nothing deserves our trust unless it can be measured against physical data. In this light, the Buddha's famous instructions to the Kalamas are often read as an invitation to believe, or not, whatever we like. Don't go by reports, by legends, by traditions, by scripture, by logical conjecture, by inference, by analogies, by agreement through pondering views, by probability, or by the thought, this contemplative is our teacher. When you know for yourselves that these mental qualities are skillful, these mental qualities are blameless, these mental qualities are praised by the wise, these mental qualities, when adopted and carried out, lead to welfare and to happiness, then you should enter and remain in them. And 366. Pointing to this passage, many modern writers have gone so far as to say that faith has no place in the Buddhist tradition, that the proper Buddhist attitude is one of skepticism. But even though the Buddha recommends tolerance and a healthy skepticism toward matters of faith, he also notes a conditional imperative. If you sincerely want to put an end to suffering, that's the condition, you should take certain things on faith, as working hypotheses, and then test them through following his path of practice. The advice to the Kalamas, in fact, contains the crucial caveat that you must take into account what wise people value. This caveat gives balance to the Buddha's advice. Just as you shouldn't give unreserved trust to outside authority, you can't give unreserved trust to your own logic and feelings if they go against experience and the genuine wisdom of others. As other early discourses make clear, wise people can be recognized by their words and behavior as measured against standards set by the Buddha and his awakened disciples. The proper attitude toward those who meet these standards is faith. For a disciple who has conviction in the teacher's message and lives to penetrate it, what accords with the Dhamma is this: the Blessed One is the teacher. I am a disciple. He is the one who knows, not I. MN 70. Faith in awakening. Repeatedly, the Buddha stated that faith in a teacher is what leads you to learn from that teacher. Faith in the Buddha's own awakening is a requisite strength for anyone else who wants to attain awakening, as it fosters persistence, mindfulness, concentration, and discernment. This faith can take you all the way to the deathless. So there's a tension in the Buddha's recommendations about faith and empiricism. Few of Asian Buddhists I know find the tension uncomfortable, but Western Buddhists, raised in a culture where religion and faith have long been at war with science and empiricism, find it very disconcerting. In my discussions with them, they often try to resolve it in the same ways that, historically, the tension between Christian faith and scientific empiricism has been resolved in our own culture. Three general positions stand out because they are, at the same time, so common and so clearly Western. Consciously or not, they attempt to understand the Buddha's position on faith and empiricism in a way that can be easily mapped onto the modern Western battle lines between religion and science. The first interpretation has its roots in the side of Western culture that totally rejects the legitimacy of faith. In this view, the Buddha embodies the Victorian ideal of the heroic agnostic, one who eschewed the childish consolations of faith in favor of a purely scientific method for strengthening one's own mind. Because his method focused entirely on the present moment, questions of past and future were totally irrelevant to his message. Thus, any references to faith in such issues as past karma, future rebirth, or an unconditioned happiness separate from the senses are later interpolations in the texts, which Buddhist agnostics, following the Buddha's example, should do their best to reject. The second interpretation has roots in the side of Western culture that has rejected either the specifics of Christian faith or the authority of any organized religion, but has appreciated faith as an essential requirement for mental health. This view presents the Buddha as a hero from the Romantic era, appreciating the subjective value of faith in establishing a sense of wholeness within and interconnectedness without, regardless of what the object of that faith might be. In other words, it doesn't matter where faith is directed, as long as it's deeply felt and personally nourishing. Faith in the Buddha's awakening, in this view, means simply believing that he found what worked for himself, which carries no implications for what will work for you. If you find the teaching on karma and rebirth comforting, fine, believe it. If not, don't. What's important is that you relate to your faith in a way that's emotionally healing, nourishing, and empowering. A third interpretation encompasses the first two, but, instead of presenting the Buddha as a hero, depicts him as a victim trapped in his historical situation. Much like us, he was faced with finding a meaningful life in light of the worldview of his day. His views on karma and rebirth were simply assumptions picked up from the primitive science of ancient India, while his path of practice was an attempt to negotiate a satisfying life within those assumptions. If he were alive today, he would try to reconcile his values with the discoveries of modern science, in the same way that some Westerners have done with their faith in monotheism. The underlying assumption of this position is that science is concerned with facts, religion with values. Science provides the hard data to which religion should provide meaning. Thus, each Buddhist would be performing the work of a Buddha by accepting the hard facts that have been scientifically proven for our generation, and then searching the Buddhist tradition, as well as other traditions, where appropriate, for myths and values to give meaning to those facts, and in the process forging a new Buddhism for our times. Each of these three interpretations may make eminent sense from a Western point of view, but none of them do justice to what we know of the Buddha or of his teaching on the role of faith and empiricism on the path. All three are correct in emphasizing the Buddha's unwillingness to force his teachings on other people, but by forcing our own assumptions onto his teachings and actions, they misread what that unwillingness means. He wasn't an agnostic. He had strong reasons for declaring some ideas as worthy of faith and others as not. And his teachings on karma, rebirth, and nirvana broke radically with the dominant worldview of his time. He was neither a Victorian nor a romantic hero, nor was he a victim of circumstances. He was a hero who, among other things, mastered the issue of faith and empiricism in a radical way. But to appreciate that way, we first have to step back from the Western cultural battlefield and look at faith and empiricism in a more basic context, simply as processes within the individual mind. Although we like to think that we base our decisions on hard facts, we actually use both faith and empiricism in every decision we make. Even in our most empirically based decisions, our vision is hampered by our position in time. As Kierkegaard noted, we live forwards but understand backwards. Any hard-headed business entrepreneur will tell you that the future has to be taken on faith, no matter how much we know of the past. What's more, we're often forced into momentous decisions where there's no time or opportunity to gather enough past facts for an informed choice. At other times, we have too many facts, as when a doctor is faced with many conflicting tests on a patient's condition, and we have to go on faith in deciding which facts to focus on and which ones to ignore. However, faith also plays a deeper role in many of our decisions. As William James once observed, there are two kinds of truths in life: those whose validity has nothing to do with our actions, and those whose reality depends on what we do. Truths of the first sort, truths of the observer, include facts about the behavior of the physical world, how atoms form molecules, how stars explode. Truths of the second sort, truths of the will, include skills, relationships, business ventures, anything that requires your effort to make it real. With truths of the observer, it's best to stay skeptical until reasonable evidence is in. With truths of the will, though, the truth won't happen without your faith in it, often in the face of unpromising odds. For example, if you don't believe that becoming a pianist is worthwhile, or that you have the makings of a good pianist, it won't happen. Truths of the will are the ones most relevant to our pursuit of true happiness. Many of the most inspiring stories in life are of people who create truths of this sort when a mountain of empirical evidence, racism, poverty, physical disability, is against them. In cases like this, the truth requires that faith actively discount the immediate facts. If we dig even deeper into the psychology of decision-making, we run into an area for which no scientific evidence can offer proof. Do we actually act, or are actions an illusion? Are our acts already predetermined by physical laws, or an external intelligence, or do we have free will? Are causal relationships real or only a fiction? Even the most carefully planned scientific experiment could never settle any of these issues, and yet once we become aware of them, we have to take a stand on them if we want to put energy into our thoughts, words, and deeds. These were the areas where the Buddha focused his teachings on empiricism and faith. Although the first noble truth requires that we observe suffering until we comprehend it, we have to take on faith his assertion that the facts we observe about suffering are the most important guide for making decisions moment by moment throughout life. Because the third noble truth, the cessation of suffering, is a truth of the will, we have to take it on faith that it's a worthwhile and attainable goal. And because the fourth noble truth, the path to the cessation of suffering, is a path of action and skill, we have to take it on faith that our actions are real, that we have free will, and yet that there's a causal pattern to the workings of the mind from which we can learn in mastering that skill. As the Buddha said, the path will lead to a direct experience of these truths, but only if you bring faith to the practice will you know this for yourself. In other words, faith, in the Buddhist context, means faith in the ability of your actions to lead to a direct experience of the end of suffering. The Buddha offered these teachings to people seeking advice on how to find true happiness. That's why he was able to avoid any coercion of others. His teachings assume that his listeners were already involved in a search. When we understand his views on what it means to search, why people search, and what they're searching for, we can understand his advice on how to use faith and empiricism in a successful search. The best way to do this is to examine 5 of his similes illustrating how a search should be conducted. The first simile illustrates search in its most raw and unfocused form. 2 strong men have grabbed another man by the arms and are dragging him to a pit of burning embers. The Buddha notes, "Wouldn't the man twist his body this way and that?" The twisting of his body stands for the way we react to suffering. We don't bother to ask if our suffering is predetermined or our actions have any hope of success. We simply put up a struggle and do what we can to escape. It's our natural reaction. The Buddha taught that this reaction is twofold. We're bewildered. Why is this happening to me? And we search for a way to put an end to the suffering. When he stated that he taught nothing but suffering and the end of suffering, he was responding to these 2 reactions, providing an explanation of suffering and its end so as to do away with our bewilderment, at the same time showing the way to the end of suffering so as to satisfy our search. He had no use for the idea that our suffering comes from our struggle to resist suffering, that the search for an end to suffering is precisely what keeps us from seeing the peace already there. In light of the above simile, simply relaxing into a total acceptance of the moment means relaxing into the prospect of being burned alive. The second simile, a man searching for fruit climbs up into a tree to eat his fill and to stuff his garments with fruit to take home. While he is there, another man searching for fruit comes along. The second man can't climb the tree, but he has an axe, so he chops the tree down. If the first man doesn't quickly get out of the tree, he may break an arm or a leg, or even die. This simile shows the perils of looking for true happiness in the wrong place, sensual pleasures. If your happiness depends on anything other people can take away from you, you're putting yourself in danger. As the Buddha notes, we hope for happiness in sensual pleasures, not because they've ever really satisfied us, but because we can't imagine any other escape from pain and suffering. If we allowed ourselves to believe that there is another alternative, we'd be more willing to question our strong faith in our cravings and attachments, more willing to look for that alternative and give it a try. And as the third simile argues, if we look in the right way, we'll find it. A person searching for milk tries to get milk out of a cow by twisting its horn. Another person searching for milk tries to get milk out of the cow by pulling at its udder. This simile is a response to the assertion that no human action can bring release from suffering. We can attain release, the Buddha said, as long as we follow the right method, like the person pulling at the udder of the cow. The right method starts with right understanding, and this is where faith in the Buddha's awakening comes in. As the Buddha once stated, he didn't tell us everything he awakened to. What he told was like a handful of leaves. What he learned was like all the leaves in the forest. Still, the leaves in the handful contained all the lessons that would help others to awaken. Right understanding begins with learning what those specific lessons are. The most important lesson and the most important item of faith is simply the fact of the awakening itself. The Buddha achieved it through his own efforts, and he did so not because he was more than human, but because he developed mental qualities we all have the potential to develop. To have faith in his awakening thus means having faith in your own potential for awakening. However, the specifics of what he learned in his awakening are important as well. It's not simply the case that he found what worked for him, while what works for you may be something else entirely. No matter how much you twist a cow's horn, it'll never produce milk. The Buddha's insights penetrated into how things work, what it means for them to work. These insights apply to everyone throughout time. When summarizing his awakening in the most condensed form, the Buddha focused on a principle of causality that explains how we live in a world where patterns of causality fashion events, and yet those events are not totally predetermined by the past. The principle is actually a dual one, for there are two kinds of causality interweaving in our lives. The first is that of a cause giving results in the immediate present. When this is, that is. When this isn't, that isn't. When you turn on a stereo, for example, the noise comes out. When you turn it off, the noise stops. The second type of causality is that of a cause giving results over time. From the arising of this comes the arising of that. From the cessation of this comes the cessation of that. If you study now, you'll have knowledge long into the future. If you damage your brain, the negative effects will be long-term as well. Applied to karma, or intentional action, the dual principle means this. Any moment of experience consists of three things. 1. Pleasures and pains resulting from past intentions. 2. Present intentions. And 3. Pleasures and pains immediately resulting from present intentions. Thus, the present is not totally shaped by the past. In fact, the most important element shaping your present experience of pleasure or pain is how you fashion, with your present intentions, the raw material provided by past intentions. And your present intentions can be totally free. This is how there is free will in the midst of causality. At the same time, the pattern in the way intentions lead to results allows us to learn from past mistakes. This freedom within a pattern opens the way to a path of mental training, mastered through experience, that can lead to the end of suffering. We practice generosity, virtue, and meditation to learn the power of our intentions, and in particular, to see what happens as our intentions grow more skillful. To fully test the power of intention, we work at making them so skillful that present intentions actually stop. Only when they stop can you prove for yourself how powerful they've been. And where they stop is where the unconditioned, the end of suffering, is found. From there, you can return to intentions, but you're no longer their captive or slave. In presenting his teachings on karma and suffering, the Buddha offered empirical evidence to corroborate them, noting, for instance, how your reaction to another person's misery depends on how attached you are to that person. But he never attempted a full-scale empirical proof. In fact, he heaped ridicule on his contemporaries, the Jains, who tried to prove their more deterministic teaching on karma by claiming that all those who kill, steal, lie, or engage in illicit sex will suffer from their actions here and now. Haven't you seen the case, the Buddha asked, where a man is rewarded by a king for killing the king's enemy, for stealing from the king's enemy, for amusing the king with a clever lie? Even though the basic principle of karma is simple enough, Skillful intentions lead to pleasure, unskillful intentions to pain. The dual principle of causality through which karma operates is so complex, like a Mandelbrot set, that you would go crazy trying to nail the whole thing down empirically. So instead of an empirical proof for his teaching on karma, the Buddha offered a pragmatic proof. If you sincerely believe in his teachings on causality, karma, rebirth, and the Four Noble Truths, how will you act? What kind of life will you lead? Won't you tend to be more responsible and compassionate? If, on the other hand, you were to believe in any of the alternatives, such as a doctrine of an impersonal fate, or a deity who determined the course of your pleasure and pain, or a doctrine that all things were coincidental and without cause, what would those beliefs logically lead you to do? If you acted consistently in line with them, would they allow you to put an end to suffering through your own efforts? Would they allow any purpose for effort at all? If, on the other hand, you refuse to commit to a coherent idea of what human action can do, would you be likely to pursue a demanding path of practice all the way through to the end? This was the kind of reasoning that the Buddha used to inspire faith in his awakening and in its relevance to our own search for true happiness. The fourth simile stresses the importance of not settling for anything less than the genuine thing. A man searching for heartwood goes into a forest and comes to a tree containing heartwood, but instead of taking the heartwood, he takes home some sapwood, branches, or bark. Faith in the possibility of nirvana, the heartwood of the path, is what keeps you from getting waylaid by the pleasures of the sapwood and bark. The gratification that comes from being generous and virtuous, the sense of peace, interconnectedness, and oneness that comes with strong concentration. Yet, nirvana isn't connected to anything we've ever experienced. It's already there, but hidden by all our desires for physical and mental activity. To touch it, we have to abandon our habitual attachment to activity. To believe that such a thing is possible and that it's the ultimate happiness is to take a major leap. Many in the Buddha's time, many were willing to take the leap, while many others were not, preferring to content themselves with the branches and sapwood, wanting simply to learn how to live happily with their families in this life and go to heaven in the next. Nirvana, they said, could wait. Faced with this honest and gentle resistance to his teaching on nirvana, the Buddha was happy to comply, but he was less tolerant of the stronger resistance he received from Brahmas, heavenly deities who complacently felt that their experience of limitless oneness and compassion in the midst of samsara, their sapwood, was superior to the heartwood of nirvana. In their case, he used all the psychic and intellectual powers at his disposal to humble their pride, for he realized that their views totally closed the door to awakening. If you see your sapwood as heartwood, you won't look for anything better. When your sapwood breaks, you'll decide that heartwood is a lie. But if you realize you're using bark and sapwood, you leave open the possibility that someday you'll go back and give the heartwood a try. Of course, it's even better if you can take the Buddha's teachings on nirvana as a direct challenge in this lifetime, as if he were saying, here's your chance. Can you prove me wrong? The fifth simile, an experienced elephant hunter, searching for a big bull elephant, comes across a large elephant footprint in the forest. However, he doesn't jump to the conclusion that it's the footprint of a big bull elephant. Why? Because there are dwarf female elephants with big feet. It might be one of theirs. He follows along and sees some scratch marks and tusk marks high up on the trees, but still doesn't jump to the conclusion that he's on the trail of a big bull elephant. Why? Because there are tall female elephants with tusks. The marks might be theirs. He follows along and finally sees a big bull elephant under a tree or in a clearing. That's when he concludes that he's found his bull elephant. In explaining this simile, the Buddha identified all the preliminary steps of the practice, going into the wilderness as a monastic, adhering to the precepts, developing restraint, contentment, and strong concentration, seeing past lives and gaining vision of the beings of the cosmos dying and being reborn in line with their karma as simply footprints and scratch marks of the Buddha's awakening. Only when you have your own first taste of awakening, having followed his path, do you really know that your faith in his awakening was well placed. Touching the dimension where suffering ends, you realize that the Buddha's teachings about it were not only true but also useful. He knew what he was talking about and was able to point you there as well. What's interesting about this simile is the way it combines healthy faith with honest skepticism. To act on this faith is to test it, the way you'd test a working hypothesis. You need faith to keep following the footprints, but you also need the honesty to recognize where faith ends and knowledge begins. This is why, in the Buddhist context, faith and empiricism are inseparable. Unlike a monotheistic religion, where faith centers on the power of another and skepticism implies a rejection of that power, faith in the Buddha's awakening keeps pointing back to the power of your own actions. Do you have enough power over your intentions to make them harmless? Do harmless intentions then give you the freedom to drop intention entirely? The only way you can answer these questions is by being scrupulously honest about your intentions, to detect even the slightest traces of harm, even the slightest movement of intention itself. Only then will you know the deathless, totally unconditioned by intention, for sure. But if you claim to know things that you don't, how can you trust yourself to detect any of these things? You've got to make your inner honesty worthy of the subtle truths you're trying to prove. This is why science will never be able to pass valid judgment on the truths of awakening, for the path deals in matters that outside experimenters can't reach. Although others may sympathize with your suffering, the suffering itself is an experience you can share with no one else. The honesty and skillfulness of your intentions is an affair of your internal dialogue, something that is also purely your own. Scientists can measure the neurological data indicating pain or intentional activity, but there's no external measurement for how the pain feels or how honest your intentional dialogue may be. And as for the deathless, it has no physical correlates at all. The closest that outside empirical measurement can get is to pictures of the footprints on the ground and the marks in the trees. To get to the bull elephant, you have to do what the Buddha's disciple Sariputta did. He kept following the path without jumping to dishonest conclusions until he saw the elephant within. Then, when the Buddha asked him, "Do you take it on faith that these 5 strengths, faith, persistence, mindfulness, concentration, and discernment, lead to the deathless?" Sariputta could answer honestly, "No, I don't take it on faith. I know." As Sariputta stated in another discourse, his proof was experiential, but so inward that it touched a dimension where not only the external senses, but even the sense of the functioning of the mind can't reach. If you want to confirm his knowledge, you have to touch that dimension in the only place you can access it, inside yourself. This is one of 2 ways in which the Buddha's method differs from that of modern empiricism. The other has to do with the integrity of the person attempting the proof. As in science, faith in the Buddha's awakening acts like a working hypothesis, but the test of that hypothesis requires an honesty deeper and more radical than anything science requires. You have to commit yourself, every variation on who you feel you are, totally to the test. Only when you take apart all clinging to your inner and outer senses can you prove whether the activity of clinging is what hides the deathless. The Buddha never forced anyone to commit to this test, both because you can't coerce people to be honest with themselves and because he saw that the pit of burning embers was coercion enough. Culture shock. When you come to practice the Dhamma, there are a lot of times when you experience culture shock. It's not a question of going from a Western culture to an Asian culture. It's going from a culture of ordinary people with defilements, Asian or Western, to the culture of the noble ones. Their culture involves a radically different set of values, a different etiquette, a different purpose. The culture of ordinary people, no matter where in the world, is just to keep families going, to keep the human race surviving, to keep people clothed and fed, to try to sort out a balance among different people's greed, anger, and delusion in such a way that things are relatively peaceful. But this always takes place within the context of what's possible in a world where when you have gain, loss, status, loss of status, praise, criticism, pleasure, pain, these things all come in pairs, so you don't get anything that's totally whole. The purpose of the customs of the noble ones, however, is to lead to something that, as Luang Pu Dun once said, is one single thing all the way through. There's no concern about keeping the human race going or keeping your appetites going, but there is a focused concern on finding a true happiness. That one point, that one focus, trumps everything else, and it affects everything within the culture, from the way we walk, the way we talk, what we wear, what we eat, the kind of shelter we look for, the medicine we use, everything from the very basics all the way up to how we comprehend our own minds. So as you shift from one culture to the next, there are bound to be periods of culture shock. But you have to keep reminding yourself that the purpose of all this is to take seriously the deep desire that everyone has for true happiness. If you think about it, you'll see that the Buddha was a very demanding person. He wanted nothing less than absolute happiness, a happiness that was one single thing all the way through, that didn't have other things nibbling away at the edges. So even though he had wealth, status, all of what they call the good things of the world, they weren't good enough for him. His totally overwhelming motivation was a desire for true happiness, a happiness with no drawbacks. In other words, a happiness that wasn't going to cause suffering for other people either. It would have to be a happiness built on developing his inner resources, one that wouldn't have to take anything away from anyone else. Instead of taking things, he lived off of what people offered him, as a way of making that happiness more pure. He also realized that that happiness was not going to come from owning or having things. He was going to have to teach his mind to be more self-reliant, and by developing that self-reliance, he found that there's a lot more to the mind than he originally expected. So as you come to the Dhamma, try to keep that same purpose in mind. A true happiness that doesn't have to depend on anything, a happiness that's one thing all the way through. And of course, there will be culture shock when your ordinary old desires, your old habits are thwarted, screaming for attention. But you have to look. Exactly where are they going to take you? They take you back to that world of opposites, the world where there's nothing in a really pure form. If you're nurturing your desires in that context, you're simply learning to put up with second best. There was an article recently in Tricycle where a psychologist was arguing that the true Buddhist attitude toward craving is that craving or desire is really a problem only if you want the objects of your craving to be total, to be with you forever. As long as you're realistic and realize that nothing lasts forever, he said, then desire is no problem. Just learn not to cling to the object of your desire. Just be content with being with the desire itself. That's his idea of being realistic, and of course that has nothing to do with what the Buddha taught. As the Buddha taught, it's not so much that we cling to the objects of our desire, we cling to the desire itself. We crave desire itself. It's something we enjoy. And if desire without latching on to the expectation of permanent objects for the desire were okay, then why is there so much trouble from sexual predators or warmongers who don't really care to hold on to their conquests, but want to keep going on for more and more and more? They like the process. They like the thrill of the chase. And this is the real problem with human desire. In its quest for enough in terms of the things of the world, it never can find satisfaction, so it always keeps wanting more and more. In this way, it wrecks the world and also wrecks the mind. So, we have to find something that will put the mind in a state where it doesn't need to desire anything anymore. Part of this quest means learning to temper your desires, but it also means refocusing them. Instead of having scattered desires for all things in all different directions, you focus it on one big desire, the desire for total freedom. Now, what's radical about the Buddha's teachings is that that desire is realistic too. That desire for total freedom, ultimate happiness. After all, isn't that why we desire things? We hope that they'll give us happiness, and they end up not giving it. Psychologists have done studies showing that people are very unrealistic about the amount of happiness they're going to get out of things. Relationships, advancement at work, a new car. These things are painted in all kinds of beautiful colors in the mind, and yet when we actually get them, the colors fade. This sets you up for wanting something else. You keep going in that direction, and there's no end to it. But even though we've been disappointed before, even though we've seen the colors fade right before our eyes, we start imagining, well, the next one, the next person, the next thing, the next position in life, that'll have colors that are color fast. But it doesn't work out that way. It's like the old story of the person eating peppers and crying because the peppers were hot. And the people said to him, "Why do you keep on eating peppers?" And he said, "Well, I hope to find the sweet one in here someplace." That's the way most people are about their happiness. According to the Buddha, though, there is one thing that doesn't disappoint. When you pursue awakening, when you pursue nibbana, it's not going to lead to disappointment. Quite the contrary, it goes wildly beyond your expectations, wildly beyond your hopes. Even just the first taste of the deathless stream entry is enough to produce a seismic shift in your whole awareness, your whole understanding in what you think you are, and what's possible in life, and in the importance of your own actions. Once you reach that state, your conviction in the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha is unshakable. Your standards for what counts as true happiness get ratcheted up immeasurably. But in the meantime, until you reach that state, you're going to have shakable conviction. It's part of the game. It's only to be expected because you haven't seen the results really turn into something earth-shaking yet. This is why you have to work at your sense of conviction. Your drive for true happiness, your belief that such a thing is possible, is what's going to see you over the hurdles placed in your way. Your conviction that there is a way out is what's going to help find that way out, like someone lost in the forest. If you're not really convinced that there's a way out, you give up very easily. You run into a thicket here, a steep cliff there, and it just seems way too much. It stops you. But if you're convinced there's gotta be a way out, you've heard of other people who've made their way out, you think, it's got to be in here someplace. You keep looking, and finally, you see how the other people made their way out. Oh, that was the path they took. So, conviction plays an important role in the path. The Buddha cites it as the first strength of mind that leads to awakening. Conviction in the Buddha's awakening. Conviction in the principle of karma. The Buddha was a human being. He did it through his own actions. You're a human being. You can do it through yours. This also requires having a single-minded focus, a single-minded respect for your desire for a really single, totally unadulterated happiness. A happiness that doesn't keep corroding at the edges, doesn't have other stains mixed in. It's something total. Deep down inside, that's what we all want, but part of us doesn't believe it's real. We've been taught so much. This culture that we're trying to outgrow has been teaching us all along that total happiness isn't possible. Content yourself with what we have to offer. We have nice jobs. We have nice cars, nice families. If you don't like a family, You can have an affair. All the legal and illegal pleasures that worldly cultures promise. They teach you to settle for these things, and people have been settling for them for how many lifetimes? But the Buddha tells you, don't settle for that. Aim higher. Aim at the heart's true desire, unmitigated happiness, total freedom, because it's here that effort is well spent. The Buddha saw that our experience of the world, these 4 dimensions of space and time, depends on our own karmic input. A constant effort is required to keep it going, keep it going, keep it going. And the question is it worth it? If you look at the world of conditioned things, if those are your goals, they're not worth it at all, because they come only to fade, fade, fade away. But the Buddha realized that conditioned things are also conditioning things. In other words, these fabricated things, if you learn how to use them skillfully, lead someplace. Even if you don't learn how to use them skillfully, they still lead places. Random places, miserable places. The question is, do you really want to go where they're taking you? If you make the effort to get skillful at fashioning conditioned things, they can lead you to a happiness that's worthwhile, that can be taken as a goal in and of itself. So, we're living in the same world of conditioned things as everyone else, but we're approaching them in a different way. This is what makes the culture of the noble ones so special. The cultures of the world teach us to delight in gaining conditioned things. Thrills, people, power, possessions, thinking that we can stop there. The culture of the noble ones, though, teaches us to delight in developing skillful mental states, to delight in abandoning unskillful mental states for the purpose of a happiness that's unconditioned. You do this by developing the conviction that there is a release. As the Buddha saw, the laws of causality are such that there are points of resonance, as in chaos theory, where the laws of your causal experience lead you to an opening that takes you out of this system entirely. That's possible. That effort, he says, is worth it. And it's up to us. As the Buddha said, this opportunity is here. We have this human life. What are we going to do with it? Are we going to explore that possibility? Are we going to test it to see if what he's saying is true? Are we going to stick with the limited possibilities offered by our old culture? Or are we going to try the possibilities promised in the culture of the noble ones? The nature of what the Buddha promises is really inviting, even though it's challenging, and it seems a shame that people don't take him up on that challenge. But we can't make the choice for other people. It's a choice that each of us has to make for himself or herself alone. But you find that if you stick with that desire for a dependable happiness, if you stick with the conviction that it's possible, the results really are greater than anything you can imagine.